Welcome back. Now we're going to talk about how to break a pattern. And really, when you're breaking a pattern, you're pushing a thought process, a behavior from your unconscious mind. It's almost like you don't realize sometimes that you're even doing it. It's something that just tends to happen, even if you're doing it consciously. So whether it's the crazy 8 cycle or something that you have within your storage unit that you truly want to change and that you know it's impacting your relationship, but you want to make better, this is the way that you would do it. And the first thing is having a big enough reason why. Anything in life, you have to have a big enough reason why, knowing why you want to make those changes. But before you know why you want to make those changes, you have to know what you want to change. So the first step of breaking a pattern is to identify the pattern that you want to change. So you have to have concrete pattern. It can't just be, I want to have better communication, because that's not really concrete. It's not a pattern that you do. It could be more like when somebody tries to talk to me about our relationship, I get mad and I walk away. Now that's a specific pattern. When somebody criticizes me or I feel like somebody's saying something negative about me, I react by being explosive. That might be a pattern. So something that you do that holds you back, or lack of trust. So when somebody tells you something, you always look for something that might be or might not be true. That is a pattern that you might have to break. Whatever it is, we all have patterns that if we change those patterns, it would make a big impact in our life in general. So again, first identify what that pattern is that you want to change. Once you identify that pattern, the next step number 2, would be to associate it with massive pain or pleasure. So in other words, you're going to get down to the nitty-gritty of what pain is it creating, first of all. What pain has it created in your past? And what pain is it going to create in your future? For example, if you had something that destroyed your relationships in the past, that made you unhappy, destroyed your intimacy, your communication, or whatever it is, your connection, that is part of the pain that it causes you. So how is it going to impact you 5 years from now, 10 years from now if you don't change it? And that pain, you have to be able to associate it big time to really feel it and understand it. The bigger the pain that you can associate with it, the more rapidly you're going to want to change it. In fact, some of the things that I wanted to change in my past, I would think about the pain that is created within me and the pain that it will create in the future. It almost make my stomach sick to my stomach. It's like somebody who wants to quit smoking cigarettes. If they associate some negative aspects of smoking cigarettes, they might not change it. But if they go online and they see how people might get sick out of cigarettes, how some of them have to have surgeries where they can't breathe properly, talk properly, how their lungs look, it might make you even sick to even want to smoke again. So you have to develop enough pain to it out. And I'll tell you a little bit of story of how I did some of these things and how I replaced them within myself. But I want to get to the third step, which is associating it with massive pleasure and massive joy. So how is this going to benefit you in the now and in the future? How may this have changed your past? So if you make these changes, how is this going to change your current relationship if you are in one? But if you aren't in one, how is it going to impact future relationships? How is it going to impact you in 5 to 10 years? And visualize it, feel it, see it. And if you can close your eyes and truly associate that pleasure within yourself of that change, you're going to be more willing to take whatever necessary steps you have to make it work. So again, you associated it with pain. Now you associated the new pattern that you want with pleasure. So with that said, you have to have a new pattern. So if you make those changes, what good will come out of it? But the same thing with the storage unit. You just can't take things out of your past patterns or roles that you may have and throw them out the window. You need to replace it with something else. So what do you want to replace that pattern with? And once you think of something that you want to replace it with, then you have to associate that with a massive pleasure. Think of yourself with the new pattern. Visualize yourself. How would that change your life? How would it change your relationship? How would it create more intimacy, more love, better communication, whatever it is? How would it create that? Because again, you can't just change a pattern without replacing it with another pattern. And that's the good thing, that you get to choose what pattern you're going to replace it with. I'll give you a great association within myself. I noticed at one point in my life that I was recreating the same relationships over and over and over again. and they were detrimental to myself. I wasn't really happy. I was happy initially in the relationship, but then I wasn't happy. I didn't have great communication. The connection wasn't there. It was just chaotic many times. And as I started to learn about this many, many years ago, before I even met my wife, I started to realize that I was just doing the same things over and over and over again. So instead of jumping back to the relationship that was chaotic, I told myself that I was going to make these changes. And I associated with massive benefits of how it was going to help me grow personally, how I was going to be able to have the relationship I always wanted, how was I able to create the reality that I wanted instead of living in the past. So what I did was that I recorded it. I made everything that I wanted to change within myself and what I wanted to change when I looked for a partner. And I looked at what patterns I was going to recreate, I was going to change them to, and what I was willing to do about it. And I recorded it, and I would listen to it all the time when I wanted to step back to the old patterns. When I wanted to go back to a relationship I wasn't serving, I would listen to it to tell myself how it was going to impact me in a negative way if I continued this pattern, and how it was going to impact me if I changed the patterns in a positive way, and how much pleasure I would get out of it, and how much pain I would be able to release. And that was the best thing I did. And I would keep listening to rewiring myself to look at it from a different perspective. Another aspect is once you identify it, you make the necessary changes that you want with the pattern that you want to make. You associate it with pain, and then you associate it with pleasure. The next step is, once you start implementing it, is celebrating it. And a lot of us fail to do this. And celebration is so key to any success. So let's say if you are looking to make certain changes. So the best thing that you could do is once you start making those changes is you give yourself a high five. If you're in a relationship and you had negative communication, for example, and you get to a situation where you have that crazy eight where you're going to respond with anger instead of with love. And if you say, I want to step away, give me 10 minutes to think about this, I need to get recentered, and then we can kind of talk about it because I want to come from a good place. If you step back in that instance, celebrate that. You can go in the room and have those 10 minutes celebrating the fact that you made those changes. Even if it doesn't turn out as well afterwards where you slip back, but it's those little changes, those little things that you do over and over again that build upon themselves. So in other words, don't judge yourself. Don't beat up yourself if you find yourself that you sometimes go back to the old pattern. Just remind yourself of why you want to change it, the pain and the pleasure. And then celebrate the small changes, because the small changes will transform into big changes. And if you can do that, trust me, it can make the biggest impact that you can ever imagine just by doing that in itself. So again, the bigger the pain that you can associate, the bigger the pleasure that you can associate to it, the bigger and quicker the change that you can make. Because again, if you associate it with massive pain and it really makes you sick to your stomach, you're going to be more willing to make that change. Exactly with the pleasure. If you can close your eyes and truly see the benefits of the change several times and continuously do that, the bigger is the pleasure that you can find in it, the more committed you're going to be. And it all comes down to having that big why. And if you can have that big why, you will make the changes. Breaking patterns does not have to be complicated and does not have to be all this big thing that you have to do. It can be very simple. Again, just identifying, associating with pressure and pain, creating concrete things that you want to change it with, and then just taking the steps to do it. Well, I congratulate you because I know that you're going to break these patterns and I know that you're going to have the relationship that you truly want. So let's get started with the activity.